Hi, David here over at Campus Cards and Games. I'm here to tell you of my review of my favorite army, which is Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, Adeptus Mechanicus is a rather new army. It's the newest army to come out in Warhammer 40k in 7th edition. It is split into two separate codexes. There are Skitarii and Cult Mechanicus. This will be the first of two videos in which I will be covering Adeptus Mechanicus. In this one, I will be covering this book here, Skitarii. And so right here, I have my Skitarii force right here. It's not a big force, but it gets the job done. Now, when it comes to this army, these guys are basically fill the gap between Imperial Guard and Space Marines. They're as tough as Imperial Guard, but they have a lot of bonuses that Space Marines get. And these guys right here are basically the military arm of the Adeptus Mechanicus. So they're basically tech guard when you think about it. When it comes to these Skitarii forces right here, they're basically guys who have been augmented into being cyborgs. And they actually are proud to do it because they believe in the machine god and they believe that all flesh is weakness. So as much technology as they can get on themselves, the better. And honestly, this is actually, in my opinion, one of the better of the two codexes, mostly because it's more balanced. You have army-wide ballistic skill 4, weapon skill 3, and the fact that it's ballistic skill 4 is much more relevant than the fact that it's weapon skill 3. And these guys get some insane bonuses too that make some people actually cry. Now, when it comes to this army, it's fairly interesting that it's a very small codex, so that means there's not many troop choices. I mean, choices in general. Like, these guys right here don't even have an HQ choice to choose from. Actually, their 4-sword detachment only requires 2 troop choices in general. So, honestly, if you want to just get the army for cheap, all you have to do is just buy a box of 10 of these guys and bring a minimum of 2 units of 5 of them, and that's actually an army. Though it's probably not going to be a very effective army since it's only 10 men. It's actually technically an army. Now, when it comes to this army, let's go over the choices for the units. You have the Vanguard right here. These guys are basically the guys who are on the front lines. These guys have carbines, which are shorter range weapons with an 18-inch range, and they actually fire radioactive radium. So these guys are firing basically balls of radioactivity to their opponents in carbine form. So they're sort of like a Thompson firing radioactive rounds, which is actually quite scary. Now, the strength of the carbines aren't as powerful. They are only strength 3. However, they are AP 5, assault 3, and they have the rad poisoning effect. Whereas, if you make a to-wound roll of 6, then it causes an automatic wound, no matter what it is, and an additional wound. So if you're going up against this big, tough Wraith Knight up in front of you, and you only have these strength 3 carbines, you're actually not that worried, because on a to-wound roll of 6, you're automatically wounding and doing an additional wound on top of that. So you're forcing that Wraith Knight to do much more saves than it would normally have to against maybe a bolt or anything. And these guys also are able to take these troop choices are actually able to take multiple weapon options, such as any other Space Marine tactical squad. However, these guys have completely different options. Instead of a flamer, they have the Transuranic Arquebus, which is basically a very long sniper rifle. But the thing about the sniper rifle is it's anti-tank. It has armor bane, and the fact that it's a sniper rifle means that it's resolved at strength 4, but it has rending. So armor bane and rending on a sniper rifle, it means that you actually have a pretty good chance of even penning a Land Raider, which to your opponent actually can be quite scary. Then the second choice would be the Plasma Caliber. Now, the Plasma Caliber, it has the same range as the carbines here, and only an 18-inch range. However, it's Assault 3, so you're getting a bunch of shots out of it. It's still Strength 7 AP2. The only downside is that it gets hot. So you have 3 gets hot rolls coming at you, so that can be a little scary. Thankfully, there are some things in the army that allow you to negate this whole gets hot thing, so there's some hope. And the last one is the arc rifle. Now, this gun is purely anti-tank. The arc rifle is basically the same range as a bolter, and it's Strength 6 AP5, rapid fire, 24-inch range, and haywire. That's right, haywire. For 15 points for this arc rifle, you are paying for a rapid fire haywire gun. This is amazing because there's so many armies in this game that actually play vehicles. Like Imperial Guard would dread this army. Like Adeptus Mechanicus would just completely destroy any army that is based around vehicles. So Imperial Knights, Guard, just all those armies with vehicles gone because of haywire. It's an automatic glance. And when it comes to these Rangers, they actually have a special rule, which is the fact that they have rad saturation, which means that any unit that they are in close combat with is gets -1 to their toughness, which could actually be quite funny because if you want to hit me on a 3-up, I'm also hitting you, but I'll at least make it more fair by hitting you on a 4-up, since these guys are Strength 3 and Toughness 3. Now, what's interesting about these troop choices here is that they have a 4-up armor and a 6-up feel no pain, which is actually quite funny because 6-up feel no pain is very random, but when it actually does happen, you actually do get quite excited because even though it's only a 17% chance, it actually saved your guy. Now, obviously, since they're T3, that means that instant death will obviously be more effective against them, and they won't get said 6-up feel no pain, but honestly, it's nice to have. These guys right here are pretty cheap at about 9 points a model, with their Vanguard here, the Vanguard Alpha, which is their Sergeant. He's 2 wounds, and he costs 10 points more, but he's actually able to take some unique options. He's able to take a arc pistol, which is basically the same thing as an arc rifle, just in a pistol form. Then there's the phosphor pistol, which basically is a phosphor weapon, which I'll get into later. And I believe there's a plasma variant too. I don't remember. But here, let me take a look. Okay, so there's a radium pistol, an arc pistol, and a phosphor blast pistol. So what the phosphor blast pistol does is that it's a 12-inch range, strength 5, AP4 with the luminogen effect. And what luminogen does is that it's basically like a white phosphorus round, like a tracer round that you would fire into the enemy. And what it does is that if an enemy unit suffers 1 or more unsaved wounds, or a glancing or penetrating hit, their cover save is reduced by 1. So that could actually be pretty scary when it comes to armies that depend on cover. So stuff like Guard, they would be actually having a little bit difficulty with making their saves with something like this. So if you use a combination of luminogen based weaponry, then you could actually get more shots out and such. Now the radium pistol here, I believe does, let me take a look. The radium pistol is strength 3, AP5, and also with rad poisoning. So that's also 12-inch range, and does the same thing as the radium carbines. On a 2-wound roll 6, that's an automatic wound and an additional wound. Now, that's all for the Vanguard. Now we have the second troop choices. These are the Rangers. The Rangers are a longer range variant. These guys are going to be what you're going to have defend your points in the back. These guys have, as their basic weapon choice, a galvanic rifle, which is basically a rifle that fires galvanic heated metal out of the rifle, and it's strength 4, AP 4 with a 30-inch range and precision shots, rapid fire. So it's sort of like a Fire Warrior's pulse rifle, but it's much better since it's AP 4. Plus the fact that it's precision shots, so if you want to take out those little 80 bits of special weaponry in the enemy squad, you have a good chance of actually dealing some certain wounds to them. These guys can also take the same special weapon options as I just described for the Vanguard. However, in terms of their special abilities, they're actually quite different. Since both of these guys have Relentless, the sniper rifle is pretty good since it's a heavy one. And these guys, while the Vanguard are getting the rad saturation ability, so -1 toughness in close combat for your opponents, these guys actually have move through cover. So these guys are what you're going to have move to deploy and counter deploy against any enemies that would get behind your lines, while the Vanguard are advancing forward towards your enemy. Now when it comes to these alphas here, they actually have their own way to get their own invuln saves. For the Refractor Field, it's 5 points for a 5-up invuln save, which comes in handy when you think about it. Then you could pay 10 points for the Conversion Field. Now this is an interesting piece of war gear in which it gives you a 4-up invuln save. However, there is a sort of wonky effect with it too. If you make a save on the 4-up, you must take an initiative test. If you fail, you're blinded. So you go down to initiative 1 in close combat. Of course, the bonus thing is that all friendly units within 6 inches of the unit get to re-roll this initiative test. So these guys have a re-rollable 4-up to save. So that's actually quite nice. I believe also these guys have the option for digital weapons, which is nice, but you don't really want to go for that. But yeah, these are the troop choices for the army. These guys are basically all you really need to actually build the army, because it requires only 2 troop choices instead of an HQ choice and 2 troop choices. And speaking of the detachment, the Skitarii Maniple actually has some pretty interesting bonuses in terms of what it offers. Now the Maniple, it only requires 2 troop choices, as I said, but it also gives some interesting benefits. Army-wide Scout. Now this is amazing because the fact that they get Army-wide Scout means that they are able to move. And this really helps with the fact that the entire army doesn't have any transports. So the fact that they don't have any transports means that they're very limited in movement, despite the fact that they have 6-inch move. But the Scout really helps. Plus, the entire army also gets Crusader if you want to run. That's not it. You also get to re-roll the basic Warlord traits as any other detachment would allow you to. And your Warlord gets Preferred Enemy, which is actually really nice. So let's say your Warlord is given one of these Plasma Calivers. He gets to re-roll 1s on it, so that's pretty awesome. And I believe it's also the unit in the with the Warlord gets the Preferred Enemy special rule. So basically, you would make your Vanguard Alpha your Warlord here, and then you would put 3 Plasma Calivers into the squad, And that allows you to reroll your Gatot rolls, which is really nice. Do remember the fact that plasma calibers are also quite expensive too. They're 30 points per gun, but I'm sure in the later videos I will show you something that will pretty much get around all the weaknesses of that plasma caliber. Just you wait. Now when it comes to the different choices, you have the cavalry, which is basically these dragoons here. These guys are a pretty iffy choice. They have a brother unit, which is the Iron Strider Ballistarius, which is a more ranged unit. I will be covering both, beginning with this Sidonian Dragoon here. Now the Dragoon is a very interesting choice. It has the Dune Strider special rule, which allows it to add 3 inches to its movement, running, and charge distances. That means you have a 15-inch threat range when you charge your opponent. And that actually can be quite scary, because when you think about it, these guys have a 9-inch move and have a 15-inch charge range. That's a 24-inch threat range right there. And that could actually be very scary to your opponent. However, there are some problems with the model, and that would be its weapons. Now, the Taser Lance is the primary weapon of the Sidonian Dragoon, and basically it is base strength 5. Strength 5 plus the weapons plus 2, so that makes it strength 7. However, it doesn't have an AP value, which is pretty interesting. But what it lacks in an AP value, it does actually have a special effect. On its hit roll of 6, it acts like Tesla. So that means 2 additional hit rolls. And when you charge, this unit also has the Joust special rule, which means that it doubles its initiative, and it gets another strength on top of it. So that means, since it's base strength 5, you're adding plus 3 strength, and every 2 hit roll of a 6 adds 2 additional hits. So basically, you're getting a lot of strength 8 attacks out of this thing. And against vehicles, that's actually quite scary. Against infantry models, it's very subpar because they would get their armor save, and so you could force a lot of saves on them, but it's not as good as what you would do against lighter vehicles, or even just glancing a Land Raider to death. If you want to run this, however, you do want to run them in a squad of more than 1, unless you're trying to fill out some sort of requirement. Because on their own, this guy only gets 3 attacks base, 4 on the charge. It's not really as many hits as you would get if there were 2 or 3 on the model in the units. Now, the unit's defensive capabilities lie in the fact that it's AV-11 all around, so it's actually better than a Sentinel. However, it still only has 2 hull points, so if you want to just glance it to death using Fire Warriors or such, you could pretty much just do that. However, they've pretty much anticipated this, and they actually gave it a special rule called Incense Cloud, which gives the entire model a 5-up cover save to act as if it was covered. So this model, even though it's out in the open or anything, it always has a cover save of a 5-up. Now this isn't Shrouded or Stealth, so you could stack Shrouded and Stealth on top of it. However, you cannot stack a cover save by having this behind cover and getting the 5-up cover save. So, I mean, there are some issues, but it's pretty nice in terms of its defense. Now, the second version of the Sidonian Dragoon is the Iron Strider Ballistarius. This is a more ranged version, and it's a very interesting choice because it acts as a very mobile firing platform. The fact that it's a vehicle and a walker means that it's able to fire regularly, and instead of a Taser Lance, it's able to get a Cognus autocannon. Now, the Cognus special rule is pretty interesting. in which it allows all flamers with the Cognus special rule to have automatic 3 in Wall of Death. And when it comes to regular weapons in general, it allows you to hit on a 5-up instead of a regular 6-up when it comes to snapshots. So when it comes to the Cognus autocannon, it's actually twin-linked as well. So that means you're paying 10 points more than a Sidonian Dragoon. By the way, this is only 45 points for the Dragoon. That means 55 points for the Skitarii. The Cognus autocannon actually has a pretty decent chance at hitting anything that's invisible or flying. So if you have enemy flyers in the air, the Cognus autocannon actually does a pretty good job. However, you don't really want to sub this in for a quad gun, because the quad gun obviously does much better. Now, in terms of weapon options on top of the Cognus autocannon, you have the Cognus lascannon. So you're switching out Strength 7 AP4 2 shots for Strength 9 AP2 1 shot. Remember, this is also with the Cognus special rule, so that means snapshots on 5s, and it's also twin-linked. So you actually do have a pretty decent chance as well, just not as good as with the Cognus autocannon. Now, the problem with this upgrade is that it's 20 points, making the Iron Strider Skitarii a 75-point model, which is pretty expensive. You don't really want to go for the lascannon upgrade. You would just go for the Cognus upgrade just to deal with flyers or just general problems that you would see in the area. Now, with the Iron Strider Skitarii, it does not get the Incense Cloud special rule, so it does not count as covered, so no 5-up cover save for them, as opposed to the Dragoons. So if you want something that's cheaper and technically has more defense, go with the Sidonian Dragoon. But if you want more firepower to your army, then I would go with the Iron Strider Skitarii. And the difference, one major difference between the two is that the Sidonian Dragoon here is a fast attack choice, as opposed to the Iron Strider Skitarii, which is a heavy support choice. And both of these are Ballistic Skill and Weapon Skill 4, with Initiative 3 and 2 hull points. Now let's get into the Onager Dunecrawler. The Dunecrawler is the tank of the army. It is AV12 all around with 3 hull points and a natural 6-up invuln save. Now I know what you're thinking, 6-up invuln doesn't really do much. I mean, you have a 1 in 6 chance of saving yourself from a very devastating hit, and that's okay, but the interesting thing about these guys is that if you squadron them, yes, squadron the tanks, you can actually get a bonus to your invuln save for all the tanks in the unit that are within 4 inches of each other. So if you have 2 more tanks behind this one right here, or in front of this one, or just within 4 inches of this one, that means it goes from a 6-up to a 4-up. A 4-up invuln save on 3 tanks in the unit can actually be really scary, especially with the fact that these guys have some pretty nasty weaponry. And let's go over said weaponry. Now, the weapon that I have mounted on this guy right here is the Neutron Laser. The Neutron Laser is a Strength 10 AP1 blast with a 48-inch range with concussive. It's heavy 1, but Strength 10 AP1 is pretty scary. And the fact that it's a blast means that you do have a 1/3 chance of just straight up not being able to hit anything because it'll scatter so much, or you have a 1/3 chance of just having it as a direct hit. And so when it comes to this, it actually does have a pretty good chance of hurting things. Since it's a blast template, you could hurt multiple models. So as opposed to a Tau Hammerhead's railgun, which is Strength 10 AP1, 1 shot, this is a blast. So let's say you have an opponent with Termies on the field that just deep struck. Well, that's interesting unit over there, my friend. Here's a blast template coming at you. Oh, direct hit? take 5 strength 10 AP1 hits. They're paladins? Perfect! It's instant death. That's actually really scary. Your opponent hopes you brought Hammernators, because that's a 3-up to save his models. Now, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You also have the base weaponry, which is the Eradication, Beamer here. Now, the Eradication Beamer is an interesting gun in that it allows you to have different weapon profiles based off of the range of the target. Now, when it comes to the Eradication Beamer, at long range, which is an 18 to 36 inch range, it's strength 6 AP 5, heavy 1 large blast. So if you're dealing with a horde army, that's pretty decent. At 9 to 18 inch range, it becomes a strength 8 AP 3 blast. That could be interesting. It's good against your marine equivalents and such, so that's a good thing to take under note. And then at short range, it becomes, at 0 to 9 inches, it's strength 10 AP 1 heavy 1. So, since the Eradication Beamer is what is naturally coming with the model, this weapon upgrade is pretty cheap, and it's very versatile when you know how to use it correctly. Honestly, I don't really use it that much because I like my guaranteed strength 10 AP 1 long range blast. But that's just me. And the third weapon option is the Heavy Phosphor Blaster. Now, remember how I was talking about the Phosphor Pistol, and that it has the Luminogen effect to reduce an opponent's cover save if they've taken a wound or a glancing hit. And this thing actually is a very powerful upgrade to it. It's twin-linked, 36-inch range, strength 6 AP3, heavy 3 with Luminogen. That means it's murdering Marines on a 2-up, and it's removing their cover saves should they have one. And that's actually pretty scary when it comes to it. So, night fighting, if you're dealing with anything like that, they don't get their stealth or anything like that. So, yeah, that could be a problem. And it really messes with enemy flyers too. The fact that it's twin-linked and AP3 means that that monstrous creature over there trying to jink to save himself, if he takes one wound, his jink becomes from a 4-up to a 5-up. And any flying vehicles up there who are trying to jink, if you were able to make the glancing hit of an armor penetration on a 6, that's also -1 to their jink. So you do have some pretty strong points right there. Now, of course, when it comes to flyers, there's the best choice for the Onager Doomcrawler, which is the Icarus Array. Now, for the Icarus Array, it's actually a 3-in-1 package of weapon options, and this is all Skyfire weaponry. This is the great daddy of the Onager Doomcrawler's weaponry. The first one is the Daedalus Missile Launcher, which fires a strength 7 AP2 heavy 1 shot with Skyfire, which can actually do quite a bit of damage when you are using it. Then you have the Gatling Rocket Launcher. What the Gatling Rocket Launcher does is that it has a 36-inch range, 48-inch range, strength 6 AP4, heavy 5, ignores cover, and Skyfire. That's right, ignores cover. So if you're depending on your cover save, like if you're a Nurgle Demon Prince trying to fly around the field, depending on your Jinx save for a 2-up cover, yeah, you're gonna have to roll your Invuln save there, buddy. And then the last option is the Twin Icarus Autocannon, which is basically a heavy 2 autocannon with Skyfire and Interceptor. So that's actually pretty decent. 48-inch range, Interceptor, Skyfire. If anything wants to get onto the field and try and take out your tanks before you can, they have another thing coming, since you have Interceptor, which is quite amazing. Now, when it comes to the point cost for these upgrades, some of them can be a little bit hefty. Like the Icarus Array right here, it's 35 points, but you have to look at the value when it comes to it. 35 points for 3 Skyfire's weapons. And those are separate weapons too, so you could fire the twin-linked Icarus autocannon as interceptor, and then once it becomes your turn again, you can fire the Gatling rocket pod, and you can fire the Daedalus missile launcher just to finish up what you couldn't finish with the Icarus autocannon if that opponent had more hull points to deal with. Now with the neutron laser, it's 25 points. So it becomes a 115 point model. However, it also does come with the Codex heavy stubber. The heavy stubber is nice, but you don't really want to depend on it. It's strength 4 AP 6 with the Codex special rule, so snapfire's on 5. It's what you would do if you wanted to do Overwatch or something like that. It's not really a dependable weapon. It's just nice to have. The Eradication Beamer, as I said, is base with the tanks, so you could just run the tank as a 90 point model with a very versatile weapon. So it's a very interesting weapon to use. However, I do recommend that you get some more practice with it before you actually use it in a more dedicated format, such as a tournament and such. And of course, when it comes to dealing with Marines, I do recommend either the neutron laser or the twin-linked heavy phosphor blaster, mostly because you get that strength 6 AP 3 removing cover saves deal going on there. But yeah, these tanks are actually pretty decent. They also have another special rule, which allows them to ignore all difficult and dangerous terrain tests. So basically they're walking and they don't really care what they go through and such. Which makes it a very interesting unit. Of course, with all vehicles in the game, they also have their own vehicle options. Now, when it comes to the Skitarii options, they have some pretty interesting ones. They have, I believe it's called the Mind Scrambler Array. And what that does is that, what is it? Yes, the Mind Scanner Probe. If an enemy unit within 6 inches of a friendly model, which would be 6 inches from this Onager Doomcrawler, then that means that the enemy that's coming out, the unit that's defending themselves, counts as having defensive grenades. So that means enemy units that are charging them don't get the +1 attack on the charge, which can actually mess up quite a few armies. Like if orcs are charging at you, they don't get the +1 charge, so that could actually hurt them in close combat. Then have your Vanguard out there, decrease their toughness, and have at them. Another vehicle equipment that you could get is the it's a very niche choice. For 25 points, you basically get a Power Fist. An AP1 Power Fist that actually comes with the Will Not Die. So you're paying 25 points for a walker that could actually do close combat on top of having its ranged firepower. Its weapon skill is, I believe, 4? Yes, its weapon skill is actually 3. And strength 5. So that means since it's a Power Fist, it becomes strength 10 AP 1 in close combat, which can actually be quite scary. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ballistic skill 4 and weapon skill 3 aren't really big things for the army, but I will cover that actually quite soon, as soon as I finish up these last 2 units. Now, when it comes to their elite choices, you have the Sicarians. Now, the Sicarians are basically Skitarii troopers that have basically lost their limbs in battle. And so they've been repurposed into the assassins. And these guys actually do their job pretty well, and they're pretty scary in close combat. Now, they do have some weaknesses, being very expensive at all. For 5 points, for 5-man squad, the Ruststalkers is 160 points. So, yeah, it's pretty expensive for the unit. And for the Infiltrators, it's 185 points. However, each squad has their own version of how they go about things. Now, when it comes to the Ruststalkers, they're a pretty expensive unit, but that's mostly because they have vibro blades. Now, you know how vibro swords work in Star Wars and such. They find the right frequency and they just go through armor like it's butter. These guys have the exact same thing. They have what's called transonic weaponry, which at first is really bad because it's strength +1, AP 5, and such, but it has the molecular dissonance rule, which is sort of like a very pseudo-rending. On a to-wound roll of 6, it becomes AP 2, and on any battle phase other than the first battle phase of combat, it becomes AP 2 in general. So as long as you're able to somehow survive combat, you're going from an AP 5 weapon into an AP 2 weapon on all your guys in the unit. And that's just their first choice. Now there are 3 transonic weapons that they have to choose from. They have the Cord Claw, which is basically a fleshbane weapon with no bonus to strength, and it's only AP 5 with molecular dissonance. And you also have the Transonic Razor, which is basically the same thing, only without the Fleshbane. Now remember that the Cord Claw can only make 1 attack with Fleshbane. So it's a very iffy choice. Now if they take these 2 weapons together, they also have Mind Scrambler Grenades, which basically act as assault grenades, but aren't really assault grenades in name. They do, however, have a special interest in my heart, which is the fact that they're haywire. That is right. Haywire grenades that you could just toss on the charge and just use in melee. So these guys are actually a pretty interesting close combat unit against vehicles. And what makes them very powerful is the fact that the entire unit has the Dune Strider rule, the same as what the Iron Strider Balistarii have and the Sidonian Dragoons have. So that means you have a bunch of these guys just running down the field with 9-inch movements, they have the run, and then they just charge 15-inch range. And these guys will just murder things in close combat. Now, when it comes to the second unit, the Infiltrators, which is what this model actually is. The Infiltrators are a very interesting unit. They're 25 points more for the base of 5. And what you get is basically a neurostatic aura. So any model within 6 inches of the unit, actually any unit that's within 6 inches of this unit, gets -1 to their weapon skill, ballistic skill, leadership, and initiative. So if you're dealing with something with initiative 5, you're basically fighting them on their own level. Since these guys are weapon skill and ballistic skill 4, they're strength 4, toughness 3, but they are initiative 4, as opposed to army-wide initiative 3, as you would see with the rest of the army here. And that could actually pose a problem and really balance out the field, because against Marines, you're attacking at initiative 4, and they're attacking at initiative 3. So with these with the weapons that these guys are carrying, they could actually cut through Marines like they're also butter. Because these guys, what, Fernando? Your Marines are scared right now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I just don't like those damn things.
Yeah.
Just murder these poor Marines to death.
Yeah. They have power swords and they have stub carbines. Now the stub carbines are strength 4 and they fire 3 shots. You don't get a +1 attack because it's not a close combat weapon. It's not a pistol, but you do get the sweet benefit of having power swords. So no 3 of armor saves for you, Fernando. Now, of course, they also have an actually more effective weapon when, against more units, which would be the Taser Goad. Now, the Taser Goad is basically the same thing as the Taser Lance that comes on the Sidonian Dragoon. It gives +2 strength. However, it does not give a bonus strength on the charge. So it gives +2 strength, making the unit strength 6, and any 2 hit rolls make it an additional 2 hits. So against vehicles, it can actually be quite scary. And if you can combo off with the rest of the Adeptus Mechanicus stuff that exists, you could actually do pretty well at actually taking out Imperial Knights. I'll go into that a little bit later, just not into this video. Now, when they exchange the Power Sword and the Stub Carbine for the Taser Goad, these guys get the Flechette Blaster. Now what the Flechette Blaster does is that it allows you to, it's a pistol, so that means you get a bonus attack with the Taser Goad, which is actually really nice considering that it doesn't have an AP value. One of the problems with the pistol, though, is that it fires 5 shots. However, it's only strength 2. So it's really there to only give you a +1 to your attacks when it comes to these guys. So that makes them a pretty good unit when it comes to taking out lighter vehicles and such, or just outright taking out enemy infantry blobs. When it comes to the special upgrades for these 2 units, the Skitarian Ruststalkers can take a prehensile data spike for their princeps, and which this does is, it's a very interesting weapon because it gives you an additional attack at initiative 10 with Haywire. It's still strength user, but it's an extra Haywire attack. So if your opponent charges a Dreadnought into you, yeah, I'm just gonna get more Haywire off on you, like it's nobody's business. Ruststalkers could actually theoretically, on the charge, do, what, 20 Haywire hits on a vehicle? Enemy super heavies beware. Now, when it comes to the infiltrators, instead of what they get for the Ruststalkers prehensile data spike, these guys get a Info Slave Skull, which gives them +1 to their leadership and acute senses. So the fact that these guys have infiltrate means that they can outflank with acute senses, which is actually really nice. Now, when it comes to the differences between the Skitarians and the Ruststalkers, the Skitarian infiltrators and Ruststalkers, they actually do have some special rules. They have the fact that the Ruststalkers, they get Furious Charge. However, the Infiltrators get Stealth and Infiltrate, which, so each of them has their own niche value in the army, and it's a pretty valuable choice if you do want to get into close combat. And these guys can also take the same options when it comes to special war gear options for the troop choices. So they could get a refractor field for their HQ, or you could give them a conversion field or digital weapons. And that's basically all the unit summary in the book. Now, you just have to know this one last thing. The entire army has a special rule called Doctrina Imperatives. What Doctrina Imperatives does is that for each turn at the beginning of your movement phase, you could give them a specific Doctrina Imperative. These Doctrina Imperatives give bonuses and can subtract from your ballistic skill and your weapon skill. Now, there are 6 of them in total. 3 of them give bonuses to weapon skill, and 3 of them give bonuses to ballistic skill. The lowest of the 2 give +1 to weapon skill and +1 to ballistic skill. Now, the mid-tier ones give +2 to weapon skill, -1 ballistic skill, or +2 ballistic skill, -1 weapon skill. Or you could do +3 weapon skill and -2 ballistic skill, and +3 ballistic skill, -2 weapon skill. Now, this is really cool. I know what you're thinking. Hey, why don't I just do an entire army of just ranged units and do all ballistic skill 7 guys? Well, that's not really how it works. What happens is that you can only use once per game So that bonus to +3 weapon skill, -2 ballistic skill only happens once. So you want to use that in sort of the phase that you don't, that you know you're not going to get into close combat with. So you would use it in the first round of the game, just so you can guarantee that you can wipe out more of your enemy's units. So if you go first, you could actually more guarantee that they won't hurt you as much as you would hurt them. And yeah, that's basically the entire rundown of the Skitarii army. It's a very interesting force, very balanced. It goes great as a support army for many armies such as Imperial Guard or any Imperium army in general, providing ranged fire support and anti-vehicle weaponry. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Alright, we'll see you guys in the next video, so I'll see you guys there.